In the second half of August 1941, the front approached Leningrad almost closely, and it was possible to reach it by streetcar in an hour. Soviet army units became encircled in the small town of Vyborg. While the Baltic sailors and border guards were fighting in the city, other units, having destroyed their equipment by order of the command, began to leave the encirclement in small groups. Along the entire coast of the Gulf of Finland, through dense forests and swamps, a mass retreat began. Individual groups, units and garrisons of fortifications surrounded by the enemy, defending themselves, stood to the death and died here every last man. Other groups, isolated, lost orientation and communication, were demoralized. But everywhere there were steadfast, enterprising people who organized resistance, encouraged and united those who had lost their spirits, and led them to the line of the old Soviet border. At the end of August there were several critical days when, almost without resistance, the enemy could break through this border to Leningrad. In these terrible days of August, a decisive role was played by small, independently acting units that delayed the enemy until the approach of reinforcements, urgently moved from Leningrad, in particular sailors, who were taken off the ships of the fleet and hastily formed into detachments of Marines. Osavsky's fighter detachment played an important role in those days. At the most critical hour, he was the only one who stood in the way of the enemy's advanced units. Anatoly Ivanovich Osavsky himself told about those terrible days as follows: June 25, I joined the only organized fighter battalion. At first I was a platoon commander, then a commissar. In the first days the work in the battalion was reduced to training of fighters and guard duty. We trained people who were drafted into the army. At the same time we performed combat tasks, guarded some parts of the railroad, searched for parachutists. And judging by the fact that on the sections guarded by other detachments, and there were cases of sabotage explosions, on our section there were no such cases, we were guarding well. It was like that until August 22nd. On the 22nd I asked to join the partisan detachment. I was accepted as a fighter, but 3 days later I was approved as a commander of the detachment. We began to equip, prepare and study everything we might need. On August 31st the detachment received the task to go to the front, to clarify the situation there and try to penetrate into the rear of the Finns. If it failed, then to make a base and act according to the instructions of the army intelligence. We created a base. On September 1st I was informed by scouts that a group of enemy tanks and infantry was moving towards the city. I took one automobile and left with 26 people. In 2 kilometers met some retreating soldiers who confirmed that in 400 meters go tanks and infantry. We already heard their firing from guns and machine guns. We got off the car, scattered on the sides of the road and sending reconnaissance, began to move forward. After walking about 400 meters through the forest, we saw a tank standing on a hill near the road, which was firing from a gun at our rear and machine guns on the side of the road. Having distributed the men along the road, I lay down by the road itself. I was not noticed, and firing all the time, the tank approached very slowly and cautiously. After about 40 minutes the tank went forward faster. When it was about 20 meters away from me, I took an anti-tank grenade and, when the tank got about 10 meters closer, I jumped out and threw it under the left caterpillar. There was an explosion. The tank with a torn caterpillar turned sideways to me. I threw the second grenade. It fell near the tank, toward the right caterpillar and drive wheels. It was a medium German tank. Besides me, 2 other soldiers threw a grenade. But the tank's machine guns continued frantic firing. Looking out, I noticed that the hatch of the tank was open. It turned out that at that time 2 of the tank crew were trying to escape. One of them was killed, and I threw a grenade into the open hatch, after which the tank fell silent and was finally put out of action. At that moment another tank appeared at a distance of about 100 meters and opened machine gun fire all over the area. At the same time a third tank, a medium tank, appeared from the right flank, which also opened fire and tried to go around, but, having run into the damp, marshy terrain near the river, turned back. Next to the tanks moved infantry. We opened fire with rifles. The enemy's movement stopped. We were afraid of them, and they of us, not knowing how many of us there were. By that time there were about 40 of us, as there were 15 men with us from those who had retreated and met us. The enemy stopped. The tank fired from its turret, and the infantry from their rifles. But the enemy's fire did not harm us. Our position on the slope of the heights was fortunate. In the firefight we spent more than 2 hours. The tank began to hit us with shrapnel. The burst came over our heads. On the right and left flanks we had no one. And I, knowing that behind there is a place where tanks can pass only by 2 roads, for there is water all around, decided to withdraw the detachment. I took it out and immediately entrenched, prepared to meet the enemy. Here we were for 6 days. Despite the fact that the enemy was frantically firing machine guns and mortars, we lost only 1 man killed, and there were no wounded at all. My whole detachment consisted of 33 men. Those were rainy days. The clay had softened. Partisans without rest were on duty, occupied a large area. And they also allocated men to watch the roads, from those who were stopped, scattered, fleeing soldiers. They were demoralized and, in spite of our influence, during mortar shelling they started to run from place to place, and therefore there were 5 killed among them every day. On the night of September 7th, I received an order to surrender the area to the cadre unit, and myself and my detachment went to rest. Here is another short story about the same days of August 1941. Then Leonid Yakovlevich Zakharikov enlisted in a new battalion of Marines, formed to cover an empty section of the front. In a day we Marines are going to the front. Grenades, rifles, and the first mortar fire. It didn't make a good impression. As it started, we started running. And in all probability, there was a traitor among us. Where we stop, immediately a shot sounds, and immediately a mine falls. But even before we went out we were explicitly ordered, you will take the near path, the dangerous path, and gather all your courage. And we really gathered it, and everything went as it should. First we were in active defense. Then we were moved to another area. We walked through the swamp all night, waist deep in water, carrying all the property, mortars, ammunition. Immediately we got into the water almost up to our throats. We walked under the fire of machine guns and snipers. Commands were passed in whispers along the chain, but the squelching was brutal. We didn't lose a single soldier in this crossing. By morning we came to our own section and took up the defense on its right flank.